Hey, Prolific community. Welcome back to the Prolific Hub podcast, a digital archive of all things life and the pursuit of creative entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Aaliyah Cheyenne. This podcast celebrates all of the change makers, way makers, and world builders who are charting their own paths and inspiring others to do the same. We highlight creatives, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and also discuss everyday life topics. If you've already rated and written a review for the podcast, thank you. If you haven't had a chance to just yet, it's never too late. Reviews help tremendously in the podcasting world, so I appreciate you taking the time to leave one. The best way to discover new podcasts is by word of mouth, so keep sharing the Prolific Hub podcast with your tribe. Be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you'd like to show even more support, text the show, send in a voice note, or consider a monthly subscription. See the show notes below for more details. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Hi, Prolific family. Welcome back to the Prolific Hub podcast. Welcome to season 4. Oh my gosh. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to have you back. And I'm so excited and honored for our guest today, the one and only Lyvonne Briggs. I am such a fan and I'm so honored that she spent some time with me to have a conversation about her work and her creative journey and where she is now. And Lyvonne is an Emmy Award-winner, an author, a body and sex positive pastor, which is just incredible, a multi-faith womanist healer. And she's leading a pleasure-based movement into righteous, sacred, holistic relationships with our bodies for Black women and femmes. And I'm just so excited to have her on the show. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Prolific Hub podcast. I'm your host, Aaliyah Cheyenne, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Lyvonne Briggs. Hi, Lyvonne.
Hi, Aaliyah. Hi, honey. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm so honored to have you here, and I'm so excited to dig into sensual faith with you. But first, I want to do just a quick introduction. I love for guests to introduce themselves as, you know, who they are and who they want to be seen as today. But I also want to share with our audience how I know of your work. I discovered you. Yeah, I discovered you on social media.
Lovely.
I feel like someone, yeah. I feel like someone had shared maybe a post of yours like a few years ago at this point. And I was just immediately so intrigued and so curious. So I've been following you on Instagram ever since then. I love and listen to the Sensual Faith podcast.
Yes. Thank you.
And I'm late to the family, but I got my copy of Sensual Faith.
You're right on time.
I'm right. Thank
All
you.
things in divine timing.
Absolutely. So I've been really enjoying working through sensual faith, because something I've spoken about on the show recently is just, I mean, it's in the title, coming home to my body. And I feel like sensual faith has been the medicine that I've needed and been looking for. So I've just been really enjoying reading it, and I'm so just grateful and honored to spend this time with you to talk more about your creative process and more about sensual faith. But before we jump into that, I would love to give you a moment to introduce yourself to the audience, for folks who, for whatever reason, don't know you. Please let them know.
For whatever reason, for the uninitiated, my name is Lyvonne Briggs. Right. My name is Lyvonne Briggs, and I'm a baddie for a living. You're welcome.
Yes.
That basically means that I show up in the world as the healer that I am destined to be and I'm living into. I'm an Emmy Award-winner. I'm a Queen's girl, and I'm a joy finder. I am a daughter of the church and the diaspora, and I am an author and a podcaster and a content creator and a filmmaker and a beauty lover. And so essentially, all of my work points
Yes.
towards healing and liberation for Black women. I am a Black woman spiritual leader who is no longer at war with her body and on a journey to invite other Black women and femmes to do the same.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that. And I'm so excited to speak with you more about all of that. Like, your work is transforming the lives of so many. It's allowed me to reevaluate and assess my own spirituality and my faith and my relationship with
Mm.
my body. So I'm grateful to have this time with you. So before we dig into other items, I'd love to just talk to you a little bit more, because I've learned through your work that you are a studied expert pastor, someone with the credentials. You went to
Yes.
school for this. This is not a game. But you're
No.
also deeply committed to, you know, versions of academia or learning that live outside of school or
Mhm.
church through lived
Yeah.
experience. But I would love to know how all those things come together and how your faith and your spiritual practices have actually supported you and guided you on your creative journey. Like, in what ways have they
Yeah.
shown up in your work?
Really beautiful question. And so I refer to God as God, creator, Olodumare. You know, you or some of your
Mm.
listeners might say universe, divine, Lord, light,
Mhm.
source, energy, universe, like whatever language you want to use, just know that's what I'm conjuring, the God of love and light and liberation. And so for me, you know, I
Yes.
am a church girl through and through. I was born and baptized and confirmed in the Caribbean middle class church of my childhood, St. James Less
Mm.
Episcopal Church in Queens. And so I always had a deep
Hi, Queens.
understanding of ritual and liturgy. You know, I was an acolyte or an altar girl. And so I was around candles and
Mhm.
bells and incense and frankincense and myrrh, right? So when I got older and got into sage, right, like in Palo Santo, it wasn't that far of a jump. It was just, it took me some meandering to get there.
Mhm.
And I had a really radical religious conversion experience when I was
Mhm.
in college at a Pentecostal church. And it was the first time that I
Yeah.
experienced like a demonstrative show of the Holy Spirit through speaking in tongues. Now, I'm an Episcopalian child, okay? I don't know anything about speaking in tongues. So the fact that I was speaking in tongues, it was like very clear that God wanted me to have this
Mhm.
experience that I could
Mm.
not shake, right? And so at 22 years old, I have this zeal for the King James version of the Bible. I don't know many 22-year-olds walking around talking about thee, thou, thiseth, right, brethren.
Mhm.
But as you can
Mhm.
imagine, in reading the Bible, I started to have a lot of questions that Bible study and Sunday school were not answering. And I was like, if y'all not going to
Yeah.
answer my questions, I'm going to go find the people who are. So I
Mhm.
started discerning my own process to seminary, which I didn't even know was a thing until I went to visit my best friend who was at Duke Divinity School.
Mhm.
And so I went to class with him one day and they were talking about theology and the auction block, which
Mm.
theology is the study of God, right?
Mhm.
God talk in womanist terms. Um, Shout out to Dolores Williams. And
Mhm.
so I was like, wait, people are doing this? People are talking about God and chattel slavery and free,
Mm.
like what? You know,
Mhm.
it had never been presented to me that way. And so I discerned that I was called to Yale Divinity School. And while I was
Mhm.
there, I studied Christian social ethics and Black women's issues. I got a full view of the historical Christ figure. I learned about Black liberation theology and
Yeah.
womanism. And everything started to come together for me. Some people would say that it crumbled, but for me,
Mm.
decolonizing my Christianity, reclaiming my African spiritual base and practices, having space to heal my bodily trauma,
Yeah.
all of that helped me learn how to love myself unapologetically, which is not what most Black religious spaces are encouraging
Right.
for women,
Right.
which is odd because most Black churches, their congregations are at least 85% Black
Yep.
women, but
Yep.
Black church leadership is nowhere near 85% Black women.
Mm.
And so I started to see the threads of patriarchy, the illusion of white supremacy, the
Mhm.
sexism, the racism, the internalized misogyny. And I was started to say, you know what? God, you called me the pastor, but I'm not your mama's pastor,
Yeah.
okay? I'm not your mama's preacher. I cuss, I twerk, I smoke some
Mhm.
weed, right? Like, what
Yeah.
are we doing?
Yeah.
And so I turned to social media and podcasting
Mhm.
as my pulpit and my platform. And
Yeah.
I was so grateful that me being my authentic self led me to a book deal where I could
Mhm.
channel a book that I needed when I was younger, right? Sensual
Yeah.
Faith is not just my first book, it's a love letter to a younger version of Lyvonne. And I think
Yeah.
that's why it's being so influential with other Black girls, women,
Mhm.
and femmes.
Yeah. Oh, all of that. You said a word, and I resonate with all of that so much, just even as someone who was a churchgoer once upon a time. I started to question some of the sermons that I would hear because I would
Mhm.
always be like, well, where do I fit into this? Because a lot of this sounds like
Hello.
misogyny. A lot of this sounds
Yep.
like misogynoir. A lot of this sounds like
Yep.
patriarchy. Like what are we
Mhm.
actually doing here? And
Right.
I think that's why just you and your work have been such a breath of fresh air for me.
Yeah.
And even in some ways healing my own relationship with the faith I grew up in versus the
Mhm.
spirituality I'm in now. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
I
that.
like to say, of course, my pleasure, and
Mhm.
you're worthy,
Yeah,
right? I
thank
like to
you.
say that there's the religion of our childhood and
Mhm.
there is the faith of our womanhood. Like
Mm.
what we were reared in, what we were raised in didn't always serve us. We grew up and we like, wait, I can't have sex before marriage or I'm going to hell. Like, wait, I
Mhm.
gotta hate gay people. Like, what? What
Mm.
are you talking?
Mm.
That don't sound right, right?
Right.
So for Black women who are currently or formerly church who know that there's got to be something more to it than
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
this is the this, right?
Yeah.
Sensual Faith is an invitation for Black women in particular
Mhm.
to live their spirituality from a place of pleasure rather than shame. So
Yes.
much of what we've heard from religious pulpits and even family, church, and society
Mhm.
have been about shrinking ourselves,
Right.
taming ourselves, making ourselves small, keeping ourselves quiet. And you can't tell me that God is good and God is great and God is doing a new thing. And I'm not an expression of God on the earth.
Right.
You can't tell me I'm a child of God, but then be like, oh, but everything about you is evil. That don't make no sense.
None
Right? It
whatsoever.
sounds like, right, there's an ulterior motive here, and I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid no more.
Right.
So it's liberation in motion for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. I mean you answered the next question, which is what inspired you to write Sensual Faith, and you said it's a love letter to a younger version of yourself, and
Mhm.
so many young Black women of all ages, I want to say young, are
Right.
discovering your work and
Oh,
learning their
for
worthiness.
sure. I
Yeah.
have yeah, I
Yeah.
have moms who buy my book for their
Mhm.
teenage daughters and they say I'm
Oh,
going to read it with
wow.
her.
Mhm.
I have a 62-year-old woman who was like,
Mhm.
"Thank you so much for writing this." So,
Yeah.
even though I wrote it for, Black women ages 18 to 45 or whatever the
Yeah.
marketing plan said, I knew that this was going to transcend age. I knew that it was
Mhm.
going to transcend race. I knew that it was going to transcend gender. I have women who happen to be white talking about, I know you wrote this for Black women because I did. When you read Sensual Faith, you will know I'm writing to Black church girls. Okay. But they're like, I feel so liberated. I have
Mhm.
men, oh my gosh, who have read my work and they're like, thank you for this. Like, this is helping me,
Mm.
one, understand the plight of Black women, but
Mhm.
two, know how to hold other men, particularly Black men,
Yes.
accountable, right?
Yes.
For what
Mhm.
we are also hearing and learning from these pulpits, preachers, teachers. So,
Yeah.
child, the pastors wasn't gonna let me come preach Sensual Faith, so I had to publish a book
Listen,
to get it to the church.
yeah, but what you're also speaking to is the fact that I don't know, like not I don't know, liberating Black women liberates everyone.
Babes,
Lib- li-
absolutely. I have a
yeah.
colleague who says, yeah, that Black women have never wanted a freedom that did not include everyone. And this is
Mm,
also why I
mm.
identify as a womanist and not a
Yes.
feminist. Because
Yes.
when them white women were creating feminist frameworks, they were not thinking about
Not at
us.
all. Not one bit.
Not at all. Not at
And
all.
many of them still don't.
And many of them still don't. That's
Yeah.
why, they have to talk about intersectionality, right?
Mhm.
we are walking intersectional beings. Black women
Yeah.
don't talk about intersectionality. We just exist, and that is inherently intersectional. Like, shout out
Yes.
to Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw for giving us that
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
But womanism centers the perspectives, vantage points, and experiences of Black women. And the
Mhm.
thing is, when Black women are free, everybody else is going to be free.
Yeah.
Think about a poor, young, queer, differently abled or disabled Black girl. Like,
Mhm.
if she can sit on a pew in a church
Mhm.
and do what she can do to praise God,
Yeah, and feel
you don't think we
seen.
gonna
Yeah.
be able to be
Yeah.
good?
Yeah.
If she's good,
Yeah.
we good, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's why it's so important to center the liberation of Black girls, women, and femmes.
Absolutely. You have such like an uncanny ability to constantly remember and cite people
Yeah.
like academics, like civil rights leaders, like
Mhm.
ancestors in your work, and I'm in such
Thank
admiration
you.
of that. I'm in such
Thank you.
admiration
Well,
of that.
here's the thing, child. These student loans didn't get here for no reason, okay? So I've always been a lover of words. I'm a reader,
Yes.
and I would
Yeah.
be remiss if I didn't lift up my dear sister friend, hip hop woman and scholar Ebony Janice Moore. She talks
Mm.
about citing Black women and
Yeah.
how citation makes you more credible because it
Yes.
means that you've read something. You took
Mhm.
time to understand it and to
Yeah.
internalize it and digest it, and now you can share it with others.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of these podcast bros,
Mhm.
right, are
Mhm.
failing because they're not reading.
Mhm.
A lot of these people with Twitter fingers are
Yeah.
not reading,
Yeah.
and it shows. You
Yeah.
gotta study to show thyself approved. That's the scripture, right? It's not
Mhm.
just saying memorize the scriptures. Who are the ancestral voices that we need right now? Who are the
Yeah.
artists that are preaching to us more than like a misogynistic pastor,
Mhm.
right? Who are the Black women whose theories are being stolen by white women,
Mm.
right? And presented at TED Talks and whatnot, and they're making money off of our labor.
Yeah.
Like, you got to go to the source, babes.
Yeah.
So I model that for folks. Go to the
Oh,
source.
1000%. And so beautifully always. I think that's another thing that really attracted me to your work is just your brilliance, and your ability to share and put me on to other brilliant people that I
Yeah.
might not have known about. So thank you for
Thank
that
you.
gift. Not just
Yes,
the
you're
student loans, but
worthy.
the gift. Yeah. So a lot of your work around sensual faith and just reading through the book itself centers just embodiment and feeling things in your body. But on the
Mhm.
other end of that, I would love to know, like, in your own thoughts, like, how has disembodiment made life harder? Or like, how has
Mm.
disembodiment shown up and, kind of deterred you from your path in different ways, or disconnected you from your gut and your intuition? I'm very curious about what that has looked like for you prior to moving into
Yeah.
embodiment.
Yeah, healing my bodily trauma was
Mhm.
the biggest thing,
Mhm.
because I have experienced so much, which I'm very candid in
Yes.
the book about all of the
Yes.
trials and tribulations I have
Yeah.
survived and now
Yeah.
thrive on the other side of.
Mhm.
But there was a pain associated with it where
Yeah.
if I ever stopped for a moment, the flashback would come, or
Mhm.
the sorrow or the rage or the grief. Like, these are
Yeah.
not words I would have used when I was younger, but I
Mhm.
know now that that's what was coming up for me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it feels like suffering in the moment, and no one
Mhm.
likes to suffer,
Right.
right? It's why we tell people to put on a brave face, and people are crying and it's there, don't cry. Like, no, God gave us tear ducts for a reason. Like, I
Yeah.
need to purge and process this.
Yeah.
And over time, I started to meet people who would give me space to feel the pain, the rage, the
Mhm.
grief. And I
Mhm.
realized that feeling it didn't last as long as I thought it would.
Yeah.
I just needed to give it space. I needed to see it, right?
Mhm.
In order for it to be true and to transmute.
Yeah.
So over time, through talk therapy, through spiritual community, worship experiences, ritual, praying at my altar, grieving, right? All of those
Yeah.
things together, moving my body, I
Mhm.
started to realize that there is no emotion that I cannot alchemize.
Oof.
Like, one of my spiritual gifts is being a master alchemist. And
Yes.
I can, when Christians say, oh, you take what the devil meant for evil and God will turn around for your good. Like, I took the things that should have killed me and I have made it medicine.
Yes.
And so now embodiment is so second nature to me that it's not disembodiment, but it's more of a betrayal of my embodiment.
Yeah.
Not listening whereas before I couldn't feel my feelings because it felt like too much. Oh,
Mhm.
babes, I feel my feelings for a living now.
Yeah.
But my intuition, she and I are locked in. So when
Yes.
I don't listen to her
Mhm.
and the horror comes,
Mhm.
it's not that I don't have someone to blame, because blame, I hear my pastor and my well, she is like a pastor, my therapist.
Yes. Yes.
I hear Dr. Brianna Boyd in my ear
Mhm.
saying, like, don't try to place blame. Like, it
Mhm.
is what it is. Don't try to, because that's you trying to rationalize it. Just
Yeah.
feel what you're feeling.
Yeah.
That I know what life is like when I listen to my intuition and follow and trust. And I know what life is like when I don't listen to my intuition. And so, betraying myself looks like hearing something and not following through,
Yeah.
feeling the dread and going through with something anyway. And then
Mm.
the oh, this is what I was feeling earlier comes up, right?
Mhm.
So my gift to myself, right, and compassion and self-compassion is, even when I betray myself and I don't listen to my intuition and something happens, it's not to dwell in the horror, but to
Yeah.
say, to celebrate that I heard right.
Mm.
Like, now I got this thing that I'm gotta heal,
Wow.
child. But
Perspective.
let me just
Mhm.
know I heard right.
Mhm.
And that is the gift. And that always brings me back home to myself.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is so profound. It's making me think about, I had done an episode recently of this show where I was talking about something I had gone through earlier in the year, and the
Mhm.
aftermath of it was just a lot. And I realized that I had been suppressing so many of my feelings around it that it just kind of erupted. And I allowed
Wow.
myself to feel it and sink into it. I gave myself
Yes.
space to feel the grief. I gave
Oof.
myself space to feel the rage. And that's something that I
Yes.
don't always do. And exactly what you said, I realized that what was driving a lot of that is because I had betrayed my intuition and I had betrayed my
Mm.
gut. I knew
Mhm.
I knew maybe I should not have gone with something through with something. I
Mhm.
knew I should not have
Mhm.
done it, but I betrayed myself. I did it anyway.
Mhm.
And I had to allow myself to move through the emotions of that. And I think what you said just resonated. And I love the perspective shift around disembodiment versus betraying your embodiment,
Right.
betraying yourself. So that's just such powerful language. So thank you for sharing that gem.
Yes, you're worthy. And I do
Yeah.
wanna offer this because I don't want listeners to get stuck in the harm of the betrayal, right?
Yeah.
Like, because then it
Yeah.
becomes self-blame.
Yeah.
As deep as the betrayal goes is as wide as the grace flows. Ooh, that
Yeah.
was good. Come on,
That
spirit.
was good.
As deep as the betrayal goes is as
Yeah.
wide
As
as
the
the
grace
grace
goes.
flows.
Yeah, I love that.
So it's not about, oh God, I can't believe I didn't listen, because it's
Mhm.
so easy to get into that really, being unkind to
Yeah.
yourself stuff. But
Yeah.
to say, okay, I heard it, I didn't listen. Next time I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
Next time I know what it sounds like. I
Mhm.
know the hair stands up on my neck. I know the dread I feel in the pit in my stomach. I
Yeah.
know the
Yep.
tone that I hear in my left ear. Like,
Yeah.
these are all sensual spiritual gifts, right? I
Yeah.
talk about in the book how sensuality is the ultimate practice in mindfulness, right?
Mhm.
And if all of our faculties are functioning healthily, we can
Mhm.
see, we can touch, we can taste, we can hear, we can smell. Well,
Yeah.
similarly, as above, so below in
Mhm.
African cosmology, as in the physical, so in the spiritual.
Oh,
Some of
yes.
us have the spiritual gift of sight. We see
Yeah.
spirits, we see light, we see orbs, right?
Mhm.
Some of us have the gift of hearing. You can actually hear messages,
Yeah.
voices, or
Yep.
you hear a high pitched or a low pitched tone, depending on
Yep.
which ear it's in, depending on what,
Mhm.
what message spirit wants to convey. Some
Mhm.
of us smell things. Your Nana been gone since 1999, but that,
Yeah.
Coco Chanel perfume, you like, what the? Don't nobody have
Randomly.
no Chanel
Yeah.
perfume
Yes.
randomly,
Yes. Yep.
right? But that's how you know spirit is there. Some of y'all
Mhm.
raw vegan, but you got a taste for some oxtail. That's your ancestors, babes. And these are gifts that some Black Christian spaces have demonized, right?
Mhm.
I've heard stories of people being like, "Oh, I see Nana," and Nana's been an
Mhm.
ancestor for 5 years,
Yeah.
and people get scared, and they drag
Mhm.
this seer to the church and lay
Yeah.
hands and pray off this demon. Like, that's not
Yeah.
a demon. That's a spiritual gift that's gonna edify the whole body if we
Mhm.
let it.
Yeah.
So, sensuality at on first hearing or on first
Mhm.
visitation, upon first inspection, might seem like something that's just bodily.
Yeah.
But I argue, just like African cosmology does, that there's no separation between body and soul or body and spirit.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
anything that has to do with your body automatically has to do with your spirit.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You're preaching. You're preaching
I
today.
know. This is so good. This is so prolific.
Okay, I like that. Thank you,
You
Lyvonne.
see what I did
Yeah, I
there?
see what you did there. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So I want to talk to you about so many things, but one
Yeah.
thing I would just love to know, and I think would be really good for listeners, is just how has centering your sensuality, your pleasure, dropping into your
Mm.
body, how has that like served you? How has that served your creativity?
Mm.
How has that served your life? Like how has that been for you?
Yeah. That is so good.
Mhm.
So, I remember for the longest time being taught that yoga is demonic, and so I stayed
Oh my
away
gosh.
from
Could
I
you
stayed away from it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then when I was in my first year at Yale Divinity School, I had a classmate from Brazil who
Mhm.
practiced, yoga activism, right?
Okay.
And so he started to offer yoga classes in our chapel on Friday
Mhm.
mornings. It was like 7:30 in the morning. I didn't have classes, so like there was really no excuse beyond let me get up early enough to get to this class.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I practiced, and Aaliyah, when I tell you I felt so grounded, I felt
Yeah.
so sensual and
Okay.
sacred and holy and
Yeah.
divine and like self-possessed. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, yoga's not demonic,
Mhm.
but how I feel after practicing yoga is dangerous because a
Mm.
Black
Okay.
woman who is self-possessed sensually, sexually, financially,
Mhm.
emotionally,
Mhm.
she is a threat to the system, right? And
Okay.
so I quickly realized that a lot of the hodgepodge that's toxic ideology and people put God or Jesus on top of it and it's
Mhm.
masquerading as theology
Yeah.
is actually warped dogma to have us at war with ourselves.
Mm. Mhm.
Because if how I felt after my first yoga practice and after
Yeah.
most of my yoga practices, honestly,
Mhm.
is how every Black Christian woman felt every day of her life. Oh, babes, the tithes wouldn't be getting paid.
Listen.
Okay. The protests would be going forth. Okay. The
Mhm.
demands for Black women being ordained
Mhm.
would be high.
Mhm.
Right. And so how do I get you at war with your body? Well, I tell you that your body's inherently evil, right?
Mhm.
Because if we don't talk about bodies, we're not talking about what happens to our bodies. And if we're not
Mhm.
talking about what happens to our bodies, we're not talking about sexuality. And if we're not
Mhm.
talking about sexuality, we're not talking about sex. And if we're
Mhm.
not talking about sex, we're not talking about bodies. And we're not talking about
Mm.
bodies, we're not talking about menstrual cycles. We're not talking about irregular periods. We're not
Yeah.
talking about prostates. Like this is bigger than just Black women's bodies. But if
Yeah.
we start talking about Black women's bodies, we are going to talk about everybody else's bodies.
Right. Right. That's so profound. I say that all the time too. I think to myself like even women in my own family like
Mm,
I
well.
listen, we're going to talk about the grandmothers, but I have one grandmother in particular
Mhm,
who is just Seventh-day Adventist through and through, doesn't know or function anything outside of that faith and that
mhm.
practice. And
Sure.
I think to myself sometimes, had certain tools been available, like maybe when she was a younger woman, certain
Right.
platforms, certain resources, certain books,
Sure,
just different
sure.
knowledge been available, like how profoundly different could her
Absolutely.
life have been, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful now to be in a world and a part of a generation where me being in touch with my body, my liberation, not only serves me, but serves other people around me. And we can speak about
Sure,
it so freely. So
sure.
I think centering my pleasure and centering my sensuality
Yes.
has been so important to me,
Mhm.
even in small ways, small rituals I do for myself to make sure that
Right.
I feel centered and I feel good and I feel grounded.
Yeah.
So hearing you speak about that is just really, really good. And I can't imagine somebody saying yoga is demonic. That is just so crazy
Oh,
to me.
yeah.
That is
Child,
so
one of these
crazy to
little
me.
male preachers was running around years ago talking
Nope.
about sage is the devil's aromatherapy. I
Oh
was like,
goodness.
"Sir,
If you
please, I
down.
beg." Y'all just don't want us to enjoy things. You know what I mean? Because that's the
Yeah.
thing about pleasure, right? Like, I talk a lot about sensuality and sexuality, which are two
Mhm.
different things. They
Yes.
inform each other, but they're different. But
Correct. Yeah.
also, pleasure is me, deciding which water vessel I'm going to drink of, like out
Yes.
of. Like,
Yeah.
say this mug says, listen to women preach. I'm
Mhm.
drinking water out of a mug that says, listen to women preach. Why?
Yeah.
Because I'm a woman preacher, right?
Mhm.
And I remember I was serving at a, moderately large Black Baptist church in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
And it was the first Sunday that I preached, which if you
Yeah.
know about the Black Baptist church, child, that first Sunday is communion Sunday and it's a big fucking
Oh yeah.
deal, right? And the pastor was out of town. It was like
Yeah.
Labor Day weekend. I'll never forget it. And I
Mhm.
preached what did Tamar, what was her catchphrase back in the day? Get
Oh
your
my
life.
goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I preached Get Your Life. It
Yeah.
was a good ass sermon too.
Yeah.
And I remember afterwards, a woman came up to me and she was like, "Now, I don't believe in women preachers, but you're a preacher." And I was like, "Well, darling,
Yeah.
I preached. I
Yeah.
did. And
Mhm.
last time I went to the bathroom, I had a vagina and a vulva. And
Mhm.
so I'm also a woman. I
Mhm.
identify as a woman.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you got to do in your mind to reconcile it, but just know you just saw a woman preacher." And
Yeah.
so it was so wild to me that another Black woman who was
Mm.
older, we talking about a wife and mother, okay,
Mhm.
saw me preaching and was like having cognitive dissonance
Dissonance.
in
Yep.
real
Yep.
time. Like, she's
Yeah.
a woman and she's preaching. Now, I don't believe in women preachers. Now, do you not believe in women preachers, or were you taught not to believe in women preachers? Because you're seeing a woman preach right in your face and
Right.
you're being blessed by her.
Right.
So that just shows you how deep the conditioning is, that
Oh
you can
yeah.
witness something in real time and still,
Struggle
like,
to witness it.
right, struggle to
Yeah.
to bear witness to what you're witnessing.
Yeah. 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 The
So I'm just
conditioning
like,
is
yeah,
deep.
yeah, it is.
It's deep. It's deep. I
That's why
don't
you got
know.
to pull it out at the root, child.
Yeah, you have to. That's the only way, and I'm so grateful for all of the unlearning and relearning and
Yes,
everything that's
love that.
happening now because it's
Mhm,
so important and
mhm.
it'll
It
only
is
make a better world in the future. So,
precisely.
I love Central Faith podcast. and
Thank you.
and I really enjoy it. And there was one episode in particular, I don't remember exactly which one, but you had mentioned that creativity is aligned with liberation. And I remember that
Yes.
phrase sticking out to me. And I said,
Yeah.
if I ever spoke to you, I have to talk to you about that. So I would love
Yeah.
for you to talk a little bit more about what that means and what that looks
Sure.
like.
Yeah. So I mention this to my digital communities often, right?
Hmm.
I say that there's a difference between creativity and productivity.
Yeah.
Productivity is tied to capitalism.
Hmm.
Productivity says, I need you to produce as much as possible, as quickly as possible, because resources are finite and this is what I need you to do, right?
Hmm.
And I'm going to put a price per hour on your labor and compensate you unfairly, might I
Yeah.
add, but
Yeah.
this is how it works.
Yeah.
Whereas creativity, you need space to be creative. You
Yes.
need room to rest and to
Hmm.
play and to read and to
Hmm.
think and to ideate, right?
Yeah.
Like, creativity requires time,
Yeah.
and time is the enemy, right?
Mhm.
Of productivity. And when I say
Yeah.
that, I mean taking time,
Yeah.
slowing down,
Yes.
stretching out that lunch hour, taking a
Mhm.
nap instead of hopping on, right?
Mhm.
On another call,
Mhm.
turning your camera off for the Zoom conversation if we don't
Mhm.
need to be on,
Mhm.
right? Those are ways that you save little pockets of time and energy so that you can actually dive into the creative work that you are here to do.
Yeah.
Because in my belief system in African cosmology, we're all sent here with a purpose.
Mhm.
And before we break the time and space continuum, we look at our life, we look at our soul contract, and we either say yay or nay.
Yeah.
Those of us who were here, I believe, said yay.
Mhm.
Then we come in born into this matrix of systems of oppression,
Oh boy.
particularly around capitalism,
Mhm.
and we
Mhm.
have credit scores, right? And we're paying rent on pillaged land,
Mm.
and that is like spiritual cognitive dissonance, because the
Yeah.
way we were on the continent, everybody has space to operate in their gifts,
Yeah.
and we just, not saying that it was like, a utopia or
Right,
anything,
right.
but it wasn't this hot messery.
Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't this election year.
Right.
And so I say that creativity is tied to liberation because creation gets us closer to the creator, right?
Yeah.
I identify as a co-creator with the creator.
Yeah.
And so creativity as a spiritual practice is going to destroy productivity as a capitalistic ritual.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Babes, spirit is
Listen.
speaking on your podcast,
Yes,
okay?
it is. I feel like spirit always shows up wherever you are. So I
Oh,
am
thank
just
you.
here like I'm so grateful.
Yes,
But
this is a
yeah.
good one, honey.
Yeah, that's just so profound. I love the idea of co-creating with the creator because I
Mhm.
I have felt for a long time, and whenever I've expressed it, which is another reason why I gravitate toward your work so much, is that I say all the
Mhm.
time, like, there is no separation between me and God. Like, I
None.
there's none whatsoever. And
None.
if I am a drop in the ocean or drop in the bucket, whatever, like I am a
Mm.
part I am a part of that
I am a part.
spirit.
That's full stop.
Yeah, like I'm a part of it. There's no separation. So when I see so many things in this life that try to alienate us from that idea or separate
Yeah.
us from that idea and tell us that we could never be, like, it shuts us off from our gifts, it shuts us off from our creativity, and it's just so
Mhm.
harmful. So I
It
love
is.
being in spaces where we can recognize our power, our worth, our connection to spirit, and how
Right.
we are driven to live in our purpose and create things that are ultimately
Yes.
manifestations of spirit in this
Ashe
physical
and
realm.
amen.
So I think
Preach,
that's just so no.
Leah. Yes, pass the
I
collection
just
plate.
oh goodness. But I just think what you said is so beautiful. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. I would love to know in what ways authoring Sensual Faith was just healing to you, because I know there's some
Mm.
I don't want to give things away. I'm still also working through it myself, and I want people to get their
Sure.
copy and read it, and I know there's so much you've unpacked in the book
Yeah.
already. And I know that folks are also have heard things online as well, but I would love to know in what ways writing about your
Yeah.
journey and your path has been healing for you, in creating this
Yeah.
work.
First, let me just say that when I was writing and
Mm-hmm.
even when I was editing, because having my editors and publishers reading through the work, we're going back and forth and we're making everything as pretty
Yeah.
as possible. It was pretty fun and
Mm-hmm.
liberating. And
Yeah.
then the time came when it was like, here's a mock up of your book. And I was like, oh shit, this is going to be out in the world. Like, these
Mm-hmm.
people are going to be reading my business.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was writing it, it felt freeing. It
Yeah.
felt liberating. It felt like finally I'm not protecting people anymore.
Yeah.
It felt like finally I am telling my full unadulterated truth. And little Lyvonne is being vindicated, right?
Yeah.
Teen Lyvonne is, somebody's going to bat for her.
Yeah.
Young adult Lyvonne has an advocate. Shoot, 30 something
Mm-hmm.
Lyvonne, like I see her too.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the healing part was letting go of the
Mm-hmm.
need to feel like I needed to, oh, let me hold this back, or let me make this pretty, or let
Yeah.
me, airbrush this out. Like, no, here's the full
Mm-hmm.
unadulterated truth. And let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I don't quote this woman often because I found out she's racist. But
Oh
Anne
no.
Lamott, she said, stop protecting people in your writing. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have been better behaved.
Oof. Yeah. Yeah.
And I find that with writers, because I coach writers who want to be published authors,
Okay. Yeah.
that the stories are in them. The
Mm-hmm.
truth is within them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're stopping themselves because they still feel responsible for other people.
Yeah.
They're stopping themselves because a part of them still is codependent or is people pleasing, or they
Mm-hmm.
feel like I won't be loved if I share this truth.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I'm more loved than I've ever been,
Mm-hmm.
because even though I'm more or less estranged from both sides of my family, I'm not estranged from my ancestors.
Yeah.
I'm not estranged from the community that I have co-created.
Yeah.
I'm not estranged from God.
Yeah.
And so it was really healing to tell my truth and to be
Mm-hmm.
like, I didn't stutter.
I said what I
Okay.
said.
I said what I said. I didn't change any names. Did I? No, because I got consent from my husband to share that story. I don't
Okay.
name my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't change any names, right?
Yeah.
And the story is the story.
Yeah.
So that was very healing for me.
Yeah. You spoke your truth. You wrote your truth. You told your
I
truth.
wrote my truth.
Yeah.
And I stood
Good
on
in it.
business.
Yes, you did. You did. I've seen online that you do coach other writers and you support people with doing book proposals if they're wanting to write a book and all of that work as well. And I think, had you not gone through the process yourself,
Right.
like, you've built this expertise and this just deeper knowing from your own experience, and now you're able to be on a path where you're supporting others to tell their stories and their truths and more. So I think that's really beautiful and a full circle moment.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, I would just love to know if you have any wisdom you would like to share for someone who is maybe scared to tell their truth, but they want to create a thing or do a thing, whether it's a book or something else. What advice you might have for them to just step into who they are and just do what it is they want to do and create what they want to create.
Stop doing, start feeling. Stop doing, start feeling. Here's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
For many of us, particularly Black women, especially if you are a child in an immigrant family, there is this notion that you have to do, say, be, achieve, be on top. Like, there's a reason why I was valedictorian in 6th grade, because I was taught that school is
number
everything.
one,
School is
most
heaven,
important.
right?
Yeah.
You're going to go to school, you're going to graduate, you're going to get a good job, even though I graduated from college without a job. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, y'all lied. I'm about to do life on my own terms now.
Yeah.
But you do not need to do another thing. You don't need another book. You don't need another degree. You don't need another certificate. You are already called, authorized, ordained for this, right? Ebony Janisse says you are the authority. That being said, feeling and knowing, intuiting, discerning how that work shows up for you is the key, because we can run ourselves ragged and be burnt out and tired and depressed and stressed and broke and all of that, not realizing that if we rest, the idea will come. If we take a nap, the ancestor will visit. If we rub one out and fall into a deep sleep, we'll have a dream heavy on the rub one out, right? Wake up and all of a sudden it's clear who I'm supposed to text, who I'm supposed to call, email, what offering I need to launch, right? My ancestors gave me the idea for the book proposal challenge. I was fussing about money and they were like, child, is that what you coming to us about? Like, they was like, one thing you're not going to worry about is money. Here, do this book proposal challenge, teach them people how to get out of their own way. We'll have more content out in the world that we need. Because trust me, white folks, they getting their deals. Okay. It's really just a language barrier. We have so many different stories that need to be told and that deserve to be published. But if you can't translate it to the industry, they're not going to get it. And that's all we're doing. I'm not telling you to not be yourself. I'm just saying, package it in a way where the people who got the money get it. Right. My ancestors gave me that idea, babes. Like, So this is what I'm saying. Stop feeling like I gotta have this plan. I gotta do this. Like, yes,
Mhm.
have a plan, but also leave room for spirit to move.
Yeah.
Leave room for your intuition to guide you. Call in aligned collaborations instead of trying to like nail down partnerships. Like,
Mhm.
be mindful that there is a spiritual component to everything,
Yeah.
including your professional life,
Yeah.
including your creative life, including your entrepreneurial endeavors,
Yeah.
right? And so stop feeling like you got to go, 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 do, acquire,
Mhm.
acquire, be, achieve, right? Are
Mhm.
you really like a hyper, what is it? Are you really type A? Are you really like a go
Mhm.
getter? Are you really a boss?
Mhm.
Or were you taught that you may not be worthy of love if you're not hyper achieving?
Yeah.
Were you taught that you can't sit down and read a book? Were you taught that rest is equated to laziness?
Mm.
Like, this is what I mean when we say we got to pull shit out at the root,
Yeah.
because you will run yourself ragged, and the whole time your idea is waiting for you in a bathtub.
Mhm. That's a word. Listen, I had done an episode with the founder of the Color Girls Liberation Lab, Jim Roberts, and it was about
Mm.
dreaming, resting, and playing. So the
Yes.
fact that rest keeps coming up in our conversation is just
Yes. Yes.
confirmation of how important it is.
Mhm.
And, you know, on a recent episode, I was talking about a lot of things, but one thing that I also brought up was my human design and how a part of my human
Yes.
design is resting. Like, that's
Who are
important for
you?
me. I'm a projector.
I'm
So
a generator.
really,
We're
yeah,
like
we're like
complementary.
this. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. You're speaking to me a lot when it when it talks about just rest and all kinds of things. And I'm into so many
Yeah.
things. And randomly, I had a astrocartography reading last night because I'm like,
I
I'm
love
in
astrocartography.
I'm learning. So I did one last night, and
Nice.
you know, we're talking about a lot of things, but the person who was reading for me was telling me, well, for you, like the way that you work, you have to get into flow with it. You cannot think
Mhm.
to yourself that you have to just constantly go, 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 go. When there's ebbs and flows, you have
Right.
to lean into it. So all of this is
Love it.
just confirmation.
Confirmation. Oh, and for the uninitiated, human design is
Hmm.
kind of like, what did you say? Like an energetic
Yeah.
framework
Yeah. I think
for
that's
like
a
how
great
you show
way.
up in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, as a generator, surprise, surprise, I have to go with what
Surprise,
lights me up,
surprise. Yeah.
right? Surprise, surprise. And this goes back to the question that you asked me about pleasure,
Hmm.
because when I was talking about how the church led me to believe that yoga was demonic, it was
Hmm.
also how I started learning about the yogi system and
Mm.
chakras, right?
Yeah.
Which are energy wheels. And
Hmm.
so in your womb area is the sacral chakra, which has
Yeah.
everything to do with sensuality, sexuality, and pleasure, but
Hmm.
also creativity. And
Yes.
so it's so interesting that those two themes are inextricably linked, right, in this ancient wisdom,
Yeah.
system of wisdom.
Yeah.
So I bring that up to say that as a generator, like, that's my energetic framework. Like, I gotta go after my joy.
Yeah.
I have a high sacral energy. If it
Hmm.
doesn't feel good to my intuition, it's a no-go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then also to your point about astrocartography, it's
Hmm.
kind of like astrology for the land.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
basically like looking at your birth
Locational
chart.
astrology. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
seeing where would be good fits for you depending on what you want to activate in your life. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an educated child. I wanted to make sure everybody was with us in the conversation. No child left
You're
behind.
right.
No
You're right.
daughter left behind.
You know what I think is so cute about that though is you've expressed in your work like from Queens. I'm in New York.
Yes.
I'm in the Bronx, and
Okay, but
yeah. But something else on another note that you've also expressed on Central Faith Podcast is your love for New Orleans, and
yeah.
yes,
Yay!
yeah,
I
having
love
lived
New Orleans
there,
so deep.
I know it translates in your work a lot. And when I had first
Mm.
reached out to you to be on the show, I mentioned to you too, like I had listened to I Kissed New Orleans Goodbye, that episode you
Mhm.
had done like 2 weeks I think before I went on a family trip to New Orleans. And
Oh,
it just
wow. Oh,
the timing was perfect. I like texted it
yeah.
to my mom and my sisters. I was like, listen to this episode. I think it's really great. We're about to go there. There's so much history. Like, you
So
just laid
much.
out so much history. You laid out your love for New Orleans. I haven't lived
Aw.
there, but I visited a few times. I loved it there when I visited, and I could
Yeah.
tell from that episode how much you're going to miss it because I know you had
Oh,
to move.
I miss it every day.
Yeah, so
I was just
yeah.
texting a new acquaintance that I met at a coffee shop,
Yeah.
and it was so funny, girl,
Yeah.
because I was walking to my car, coming out of the shop. He was like kind of walking perpendicular, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
And I could tell he wanted to say something to me because, I'm stunning and a
Of
baddie for a
course.
living.
How could he not?
He was also older.
Okay.
And so I saw he had on a New Orleans Saints t-shirt and he had a
Oh,
504 tattoo on his
okay.
forearm.
Yeah.
So I was like, "You from New Orleans?"
Mm,
Hey, immediately just it's just so about people from New Orleans. Like,
yeah.
they love meeting other people from the city. They
Yeah.
love when you love the city.
Mhm.
And we just exchange contact information. And child, we've been going back and forth about restaurants. Have you eaten here? Have you
Okay.
eaten here?
Yeah.
Like getting the bucket list together.
Yeah.
And he's there now. So like this older,
Mm.
I guess, Creole child. I don't know. He said he didn't speak to me because he was like, I didn't want you to think like, why is this old white man talking to me even though
Oh,
I'm not white? I was like, child, it's fine.
listen, it's a whole
But
other conversation.
right. But New Orleans is just such a magical, mystical place. And
Yeah.
I healed like in leaps and bounds when I
Yeah.
was there,
Yeah.
particularly as it pertains to my paternal lineages. So
Mhm.
child, I'm trying to go back
Yes.
before it's underwater
Oh, you've
because
expressed that on the episode too.
babes,
Climate change is climate changing and
a
changing.
mamma jamma,
Yeah,
okay?
it's changing a lot of things. It's really
It
sad.
is.
I think the other thing, like when I went on that trip, that was interesting is just how much certain areas have changed since Hurricane Katrina
Mhm.
and what it looks like for the people who were there, who
Mhm.
were displaced, and who's living there now. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, if you
mm,
haven't been to New Orleans yet, listeners, like, I don't know where else you planning to travel within the continental United States, but New
mm,
Orleans needs to be top of your list. And when you
yeah,
go, don't just go to take, go to give as well.
yeah,
Take offerings, spend and invest in local businesses. There are
yeah,
so many Black-owned places, so many Black woman-owned shops
mm-hmm,
and restaurants and stores. Like, just do your
yeah,
research, be mindful, ask if you don't know,
yeah,
and enjoy yourself.
yeah. Um, this has just been really great.
Aw,
I don't
yeah.
know. I've loved this conversation. So to end,
Likewise.
thank you. To end on a positive note, I would love to know
Yeah.
what's something that's bringing you just immense joy these days. What's bringing you joy? What's making you happy and feel good?
This is probably the third time I've said this on this podcast. Being a baddie for a living. That
Okay.
means that I
Yes.
take care of myself. I make
Yes.
sure I look good, smell good, feel good.
Yes.
That could mean exfoliating my body. That could mean
Mhm.
masturbating with a vibrator. That could
Yeah.
mean putting on a lip and a wig. It could
Mhm.
mean going out to a cigar lounge and ending up being treated by 4 Negroes,
Mm.
okay? To
Oh,
some bourbon
that's
and some
right.
salad. Okay, I'm telling my business. But just living life. It doesn't matter what my bank account says. It doesn't matter who
Mm.
has their misconceptions about me. It doesn't matter who doesn't think, I'm living the way that I'm supposed to. Like, as long as I am doing me and I feel good and I'm being ethical and
Mhm.
aligned and I'm not hurting nobody, babes, I'm gonna do me. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's exciting me now are my books and my evolution. So
Yeah.
I'm currently reading Sula by Toni Morrison
Okay.
because Sula is bae.
Yeah.
Okay. I read Sula for the first time when I was 15, and I feel now that I'm circling back to that text at 41, it's just gonna be chef's
Yeah.
kiss, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm also reading Salvation,
Mhm.
Black People in Black Love, by Bell Hooks.
Okay.
Feel like now's a good time for me to take a deep dive, because I want my man, my man, my man. All right. And so we just leaning in,
Yeah.
but also shedding the former version of myself. Like, as much as
Mhm.
I love talking about Sensual Faith, the platform, the book, the podcast, the
Mhm.
audiobook, the framework has been so, so good to me.
Yeah.
And listeners, you can't see me, but I'm like sitting here with my hands over my heart and my eyes
Yeah.
are closed because I'm
Yeah.
feeling how
Yeah.
good Sensual Faith has been to me.
Yeah.
Also, and there's more to me than
Yeah.
Sensual Faith. And
Absolutely.
so there's been
Yeah.
some grief in, dislodging from sensual faith
Yeah.
and like kind of absorbing it into my being and just expanding and coming out of my cocoon, being like, what's next, heifer? Like, we
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah.
that's what's
Yeah.
bringing me joy
Yeah.
these days.
I love that. Practicing embodiment and exploring
Yes.
what's next and using your work as a foundation to propel you into a new area. Lyvonne, this has just been a really beautiful conversation with you. Thank you for saying
Yes.
yes to the invitation and
You're
taking the
worthy,
time.
my
Thank you, and
love.
speaking to me. And I'm just so honored and grateful. And a baddie you are. Like you were inspiring me to
If
get
you
it
don't know,
together.
now you know.
Yes.
Okay, come
Yes.
see me, holler at me. I'm at Lyvonne Briggs on all the things. LyvonneBriggs.com is my website. My Patreon is patreon.com/Lyvonne Briggs. I do
Yes.
one-on-one spiritual life coaching, book coaching, group coaching, all the coachings. I speak, I teach, I preach. Invite me out to all the things, and let's keep the conversation going.
Yes, and all of that will be linked in the show notes for this episode. So thank you so much.
All You're worthy, beloved. Thank you.
What an incredible conversation with Lyvonne Briggs. Lyvonne is such a big personality. She is just larger than life, and to just be in conversation with her and to have a moment of her time, to be in her presence, to bear witness to her brilliance and her mind and her creative power is just, oh, it feels so great. And I'm so honored to have had some time to speak with her and to have had such an incredible conversation. I hope that it fed you. I hope that you learned something new. I hope that you feel seen and empowered and inspired by that conversation. And yeah, if you love the episode as much as I did, please be sure to share it with a friend or a family member or someone who you know needs it. And feel free to come back to it as a resource and a reference at any time. And Lyvonne, thank you again. So incredible and so inspiring, and I'm deeply honored. With that, that is the end of our episode. So I will catch you all on the next one. Thank you so much for tuning. Bye. Hey, friend. If you made it this far, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. The Prolific Hub podcast is hosted and produced by me, Aaliyah Cheyenne. If this episode resonated with you, please leave a 5-star rating and positive written review. Reviews help tremendously in the podcasting world, so I appreciate you taking the time to leave one. Be sure to share this episode with a friend and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the Prolific Hub Pod on your favorite social media platforms to stay connected. Consider supporting the show with a monthly subscription or send us your thoughts on this episode via text or voice note. Find all of the juicy details in the show notes below. Catch you on the next episode.